Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. After being questioned at the Australian Financial Review's Infrastructure Summit yesterday about the Suburban Rail Loop project, which didn't go through the Prime Minister's stated Infrastructure for Australia process, the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government, who is quoted in the AFR today, said, "I'm pretty confident that the project's right and is right for investment." On what basis of rigorous assessment, other than her own confidence, did the government approve $2.2 billion of funding in the budget for the Suburban Rail Loop project?
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Wong. Senator Henderson, the minister has not even begun her response. I would ask you to be quiet. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President, and thank you to the senator for the question. And I do recall the extent to which all of us tried to campaign for state elections in this chamber, and I'm not sure any of us are actually very successful in it, but I'm happy to take the question. And if my colleague, Minister Watt, who actually represents the minister whose quote you are using, is able to assist, I'm sure he will. In relation to infrastructure projects, we have said that we will review infrastructure projects to better align investment with construction market capacity. We are consulting.
Order.
Look, you know, you are in a permanent state of outrage, aren't you? A permanent state of outrage. There's never any light and shade with this particular senator. It's just permanently outraged. We're always right up there, aren't we? But I digress. As I said in response to the budget, we are aligning investment with construction market capacity. We are consulting with states and territories throughout this process. This is the responsible and honest thing to do. If those opposite were honest about this, they would recognise that the government is increasing funding to infrastructure in regional Australia over the next decade. I'll repeat that, increasing funding to regional infrastructure over the next decade. But rather than simply announcing, we are ensuring that we can actually deliver on what we say we will do. And in relation to the points that the senator raised in her question, I would say it is interesting to get a question which goes to business cases and probity from a minister who never demonstrated that, in her period in government. And here you might think that's outrageous, but I think the public record speaks for itself.
Order.
Well, which part of that does Senator Mackenzie want me to resolve from? In relation,
thank you, Minister Wong. Your time has expired. Just a moment, Senator Mackenzie. Before I call you, there was so much noise during the minister's response. I found it very difficult to hear. I would ask all senators to respect that the minister has the right to answer the question in silence. Senator Mackenzie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Minister, given the government's documents show funding would not flow to Dan Andrews' controversial Suburban Rail Loop project until 24-25, at the earliest 19 months away, for what reason was funding awarded in the October 22 budget, other than to suit Labor's political timelines?
Order. Order on my right. Order. I'm not going to call the minister until there's quiet. Senator Henderson, please. We are not at a football match. We are in Senate question time, and you are to be silent to hear the response and out of respect to the person answering the question. And before I call the minister response, I do remind Senator Mackenzie to refer to people by their correct titles. So it would be Premier Andrews. Thank you, Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I'm asked. Really? She can't. Anyway.
Your team love it when you use it all the time. They love it.
I'm asked why the government funded the project It's called honouring an election commitment. We had an election commitment to provide $2.2 billion towards early works for suburban rail loop east, and a detailed business and investment case was released by Victoria last year, which demonstrated a benefit-cost ratio.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
Point of order relevance, Madam President. Mine went to the profiling of the project. The funding doesn't flow in your own government documents till 24-25. You could have run it through Infrastructure Australia processes, but you announced it in this budget.
Senator McKenzie, that question does go to why, and that's what the minister is responding to. She is being directly relevant. Please continue, Minister Wong.
Thank you. Well, I was actually asked why we were funding it, and I was explaining to the senator why we were funding it. And I'd also make the point, and she may not wish to hear the facts about the detailed business and investment case, it demonstrated a benefit-cost ratio of up to 1.7. That is $1.70 return for every dollar invested. It will still be assessed, subject to assessment by Infrastructure Australia, as is required.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McKenzie, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you. It's nice to know it will be going through Infrastructure Australia. Minister King also told the AFR Infrastructure Summit that if Infrastructure Australia's review of the project sees it not worth progressing, that she would personally talk to the Victorian Labor government about, and I quote her again, how they think they can make it stack up. Minister, at what point of the PM's reformation of Infrastructure Australia are we going to see ministers not intervening to make sure that projects unfit for funding are going to be persisted for until they stack up?
Minister.
Well, I hadn't heard that quote before, but if I— well,
order.
Sorry, I've been doing a few other things. I'm sorry, I don't sit around reading the quotes of every. No, it's not that. I'm just saying, I don't have every quote of a minister who I don't represent. I'm sure Senator Watt would have an excellent answer on this question. I'm sure he read every word.
Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Minister Wong. Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie.
Madam President, as Minister Wong is seeking to elicit a laughs from her side, the relevance of my question—
that is not a point of order. That is not a point of order. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. I think you were going there anyway, but surely Senator McKenzie has to name the point of order.
Why are you on your feet?
What is the point?
Senator Watt.
About us the point of order.
I've ruled the point of order out of order. 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 Seriously, senators. I'm going to ask Minister Wong to continue.
Thank you, President. What I was going to say, from what I heard of the quote, it seems an eminently sensible position to ensure that Infrastructure Australia can properly assess this important project, which the government was elected with a commitment to implement, which we are funding, which already has a business case. It seems to me of eminently sensible position to ensure that it is properly—
Order.
Eminently sensible to ensure it properly stacks up, and that's what the minister's quote goes to.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Your time has expired. Senator White.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. The Albanese government's proposed changes to workplace relations laws will deliver much-needed job security and wage increases after a decade of neglect by the Liberals and Nationals. How will the Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill support small businesses to bargain with their workers, and what does this mean for workers?
Minister Watt.
Thank you.
Order.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator White, who again, one of the people on our side of the chamber who has a long history of standing up for the rights of workers and also having formed very cooperative relationships with business in her career in the union movement. And Senator White is a great example of what our government is trying to do, which is build partnerships between unions, workers and business for the benefit of the economy and for the benefit of those businesses and also those workers. I understand it's a foreign concept for those opposite who just thrive on conflict and want to keep us in that conflict-driven environment that we've been in for 10 years, but some of us actually want to move on. And you know what? So does small business. Let me just give you one example of the small businesses out there that are actually looking forward to the kind of multi-employer bargaining that we are proposing to have. Now,
Senator Watt, I'm going to wait for silence. Order. I would ask Senators Mackenzie and Henderson in particular to lower the tone of your interjections, please. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. Now, on the one hand, the opposition demands examples of small businesses that support the system we're trying to bring in, and the minute you try and do it, they don't want to hear about it. And that's because the opposition are intent on keeping our country in a conflict-driven model that does not work for anyone. Ms Julie Price, the Executive Director of the Community Childcare Association, gave evidence to the Senate inquiry recently. She represents over 750 community not-for-profit early childhood education and care centres. She gave evidence explaining that multi-employer bargaining in Victoria had delivered above-award wages for workers over a decade with the support of employers. What she said was that—
Please resume your seat. Order, Senators, particularly those on my left. Please continue, Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Now, Ms Price, who represents hundreds of community-owned childcare centres, made the point that the agreement they had struck across a range of enterprises covers just under 60 services in Victoria. It delivers better wages, 16% above the award. And you know what? She goes on to say that the centres are community-owned, they're managed by boards and volunteers, and they don't have the financial resources or the expertise in the IR to be able to negotiate an agreement themselves. This is the kind of system that small businesses can take advantage of to avoid having big HR departments and strike agreements with their workers, which is what they want.
Your time has expired. Senator White, first supplementary.
Minister, it's well known that small businesses are more award reliant. Why is it important to provide small businesses with additional support to create agreements with workers?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator White. As we say, we understand that it's a foreign concept for the opposition, that employers and workers can act together cooperatively for both their benefit, but our government actually understands that. Mr Mimo Scavera, the president of the HVAC Manufacturing and Installation Association, also gave evidence to the Senate inquiry. He represents 9 major employers, collectively employing approximately 900 people.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. No, Senator Mackenzie, I'm waiting until your own side is quiet. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. On relevance to the good senator's question, can the minister name one small business that actually supports Labor's
Senator Mackenzie,
reforms?
That is not a point of order. Thank you. Senator Wong.
Well, President, the persistent point of orders which actually go to the content of substantive debate, we're very happy to have substantive debate. This is time for question time. This is real. Well,
order.
This is not the ways in which points of orders have traditionally been used, nor should be used. If the senator wants a debate, we can have a debate.
Thank you, Minister Wong. I ruled the point of order out of order. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. And isn't it terrible to see the coalition not want to hear from employer groups? You really would have thought that of all the parties, they would support employer groups, but not the ones that support multi-employer bargaining. The ones that oppose it are fine. The ones that support it are terrible. Mr. Scavera said it's not about having a race to the bottom, to put it bluntly.
Senator
At
Watt,
the moment,
please resume your seat. Again, noise, please. Please continue, Senator Watt.
Thank you. Mr Scavera said it's not about having a race to the bottom, to put it bluntly. At the moment, the major construction projects don't have any regulation in relation to pay. So you have a mixture of people on a site that will either be enterprise agreement covered, award covered or covered by whatever other means people are creating. We're hoping that through this mechanism we can have an industry agreement through multi-enterprises. That's what we're aiming for, to regulate the market.
Your time has expired. Senator White, second supplementary.
Minister, why is it urgent that we pass these reforms before Christmas?
Minister. Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Please resume. Please resume your seat. once again, the interjections, particularly from my left, are absolutely disorderly, and I would ask you to be quiet so that we can all hear the minister's response. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. It is urgent that we pass these reforms before Christmas because they will be good for workers and good for small businesses. They will be good for the economy. And Senator Pocock and Senator Lambie, we all know that you have important decisions to make about this legislation in coming days, and I encourage you to think about the arguments we are putting forward, that small businesses are putting forward, or you can decide to line up with that rabble over there who want to continue to keep Australia in conflict and low wages and low productivity. I know enough about Senator Pocock and Senator Lambie that they want to see agreements and they want to see cooperation in workplaces that deliver to businesses and workers, and that is exactly what we are putting forward here. The comments that we saw given at the Senate inquiry by representatives of childcare centres, by representatives of manufacturing industries indicate
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Pocock.
Point of order, President. If the minister could please direct his comments through the President. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Order. 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 Senators on my left. Minister Watt, if you would direct your contributions to the chair.
Thank you, President. And through you, President, I say to Senator Pocock and Senator Lambie, take the evidence of the committee inquiry into account. We've heard from childcare representatives, we've heard from manufacturing representatives who say that multi-employer bargaining is what they want.
Thank
it's good
you,
for
Minister.
their
Your
businesses
time
and good
has
for their
expired.
workers.
Senator Van.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The October budget contained no immediate relief for Australians facing rising inflation and cost of living crises. Instead, the government committed to spending $2.2 billion on the suburban rail loop, despite the Victorian Auditor-General finding that the Victorian government, and I quote, did not demonstrate the economic rationale for the entire project, and they have told us they have no plans to do so. Minister, isn't it true that Labor is supporting Dan Andrews' pet projects that don't stack up but refuses to find sensible policies that will reduce the cost of living for Victorians without driving up inflation?
Before I call the minister, order. I remind senators that Senator Wong. I remind senators that state leaders are entitled to be addressed by their correct title, and that's the second time in a matter of minutes I've had to remind senators on my left of that. Minister.
Thank you. And I think the best way to answer this question is to say I completely reject the assertions put in the question, and I reject the assertion that there was no cost of living relief in the budget. If you read the budget, you would read the investments that we are making in cheaper childcare, in renewable energy, in free TAFE, as some of those investments. Also, I would say look at the more than $32 billion in increased payments through pensions and other payments through the social security system. $32 billion, the biggest increase to assist, and the reason, Senator Henderson, I hear you yelling at me and interjecting, the reason that those payments have increased so considerably is to assist lower-income households with those increased costs of living, largely driven by those increases you hid before the change of government to the increases in energy prices. So the reference
Minister,
to cost of living relief—
Senator Henderson.
Ask the senator to please direct her comments through the chair. Thank you.
She is doing that, Senator Henderson. Minister, please continue. Please continue.
Thank you. Well, perhaps if Senator Henderson stopped interjecting, then we wouldn't be in a position where we had to respond to those interjections.
Order.
In terms of infrastructure, and Senator Van's question went to infrastructure, the Infrastructure Minister has gone through the infrastructure portfolio very carefully to identify projects where sensible investments can be made, that meet tests, like, for example, having a business case anywhere near the project. There are some projects funded under your government when you were in power that didn't have that piece of work underpinning it. To go through, to work with Infrastructure Australia, the business case that the Victorian government has done, and I know that Minister King is working with Infrastructure.
Senator Van, first supplementary.
Thank you. The Victorian Auditor-General said of the suburban rail loop, and I quote, "The benefit-cost ratio for the project is 0.51 when calculated in line with the DTF's guidance, below even the Victorian Parliamentary Budget Office rating of 0.6 to 0.7. Minister, why is the government spending $2.2 billion on a project that demonstrably will not deliver value for money, but will continue to overheat in the construction sector, pushing up prices for Victorians, contributing to inflation and making the cost of living crisis worse for Victorians?"
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister.
Thank you. Well, again, I reject the assertions put in the question to me. The suburban rail loop is a once-in-a-generation infrastructure project. We are honouring our election commitment. We are doing what we said we would do. We are delivering upon that election commitment. And that project will transform how Victorians move around the state and reshape the way Victoria grows. And I would say, in terms of cost of living relief, the budget provided cost of living relief in a way that is affordable and responsible and doesn't add to inflation. And I think you'll see from all of the assessment of the budget, find somebody who, and all of the economists and that have assessed the budget, who said that the budget in itself does not add to inflation, and cost of living relief was provided where it was affordable and sustainable.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Van, second supplementary.
The October budget confirmed that the Albanese government was cutting hospital funding in Victoria by $1.4 billion. Why is the Labor government supporting Premier Andrews' boondoggle while at the same time making
Senator
Premier
McKenzie,
Andrews' health crisis?
Senator Van, please resume your seat. Senator McKenzie, I'm going to ask you to withdraw that remark.
Madam President, I do withdraw calling our Premier of Victoria.
You do not repeat. Senator McKenzie, you know my rulings on these things, and I didn't think I would have to remind you not to repeat the offence. Simply withdraw the remark.
I withdraw the remark.
Thank you. Senator Van, please continue with your question, and order on my right.
Why is the Labor government supporting the member for Mulgrave's boondoggle while at the same time making his health crisis even worse by cutting funding to Victorian hospitals?
Thank you, Senator Van. Minister.
Thank you. And I almost feel sorry for Senator Van being asked to ask that question because those who wrote it know very well that there is no cut to health funding in Victoria, that they know very well what has happened there. We look forward to working with the Victorian government, and we look forward to a re-elected Dan Andrews government after Saturday's election to deliver on these important infrastructure commitments, to work in partnership with them. Remember that, where you have federal and state governments working together in the interests of the nation. We look forward to that. We look forward to continuing that, delivering on our election commitments, working with the Victorian government on infrastructure and, importantly, on health, to make sure that Australians have the healthcare system and the infrastructure they deserve from governments that are mature enough and responsible enough to work together.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Rice.
President, my question is for the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Murray Watt. Minister Watt. Right now in Victoria, the Andrews government is logging 4 MCGs worth of native forest every day. The Victorian government pledged to end native forest logging by 2030 and protect 9,000 hectares of old-growth forests. But a damning expose by the ABC last week found that the state-owned logging operator Vic Forests is continuing to log old-growth forests that were marked for protection. And this is on top of 2 court findings in the last month that found that Vic forests were illegally logging forests that was home to 2 threatened species, greater gliders and tree geebungs. Minister, what is the federal government and you as minister doing to ensure that Victoria's native forests are actually being protected?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And thank you.
Senator Watt.
It sort of feels like it's Victorian election week
Senator
this
Watt,
week, doesn't it?
please resume your seat. I would ask all senators, in particular Senator Scarr and Senator Thorpe, to be quiet while the minister answers the question. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And yes, clearly it's Victorian election week, and clearly there's a couple of parties who are scrambling for votes rather than getting on with the job of governing, which is what we are doing, and what the Andrews government is doing in Victoria right now. I have met with Senator Rice about forestry issues, and I understand that these are things that you care about very sincerely. And as I've explained to Senator Rice, the Albanese Labor government does support a sustainable forestry industry. We respect the fact that there are some states who have made decisions about phasing out native forestry, others have not. The reality is that our country is in a position at the moment with a massive timber shortage and potentially other related shortages. And there are other parts of the country who have chosen to continue with native forestry at the moment, including Tasmania, and that is something that we support. That is their right to do that. But of course, Senator Rice is well aware that in states like Victoria, we have a regional forestry agreement process underway, which leaves a lot of the management of those forestries to states. There's obviously been litigation about these matters recently, with courts having things to say about that, and I know the Victorian government is taking those decisions seriously. But what the Albanese government is doing is trying to strike a balance between the need for a forestry industry to provide the wood and timber and paper products that we need, while also making sure that we are protecting the environment. That's why we went to the election with a big commitment to expand the plantation estate in Australia and plant more trees through plantations to provide that timber. But the reality is that in many parts of the country at the moment, the native forestry industry plays an important role in meeting that supply, and we support the people who work at that industry. So we think that that's a balanced approach, and we think that that's the one that Australians want to see.
Senator Rice, first supplementary.
Minister, when it comes to protecting the critically endangered ecosystem of mountain ash forests, scientists tell us that 2030 is way too late. They will be pretty much logged out by then. At the recent climate conference, Australia joined the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership to increase action towards last year's COP commitment to strengthen our efforts to conserve forests and accelerate their restoration. How are you going to bring Victoria into line so we can deliver on this international commitment? Will you amend the EPBC Act to ensure that that's the case?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Your time has expired. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Rice. As Senator Rice is well aware, the way the RFA system, the Regional Forest Agreement system, works is that it essentially displaces the EPBC in relation to forestry endeavours and has its own system of managing the environmental needs of those forests. And that is a system that we continue to support. Senator Rice is also aware that the Victorian government has made decisions about the future of its native forests. As I say, we respect their right to make those decisions, but we do support the ongoing efforts in other parts of the country to pursue native forestry, including in Tasmania, which is what they've chosen to do. We are trying, as I say, to strike a balanced approach which meets the forestry needs and the timber needs of our country, supports the workers in those regional communities, while also maintaining environmental protections. Senator Rice asked about the EPBC. Again, she would be well aware that the EPBC and the Samuels Review is currently being considered by the government, and we'll have more to say about that before too long.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Rice, second supplementary.
Thanks, Minister. A week after COP27 and amongst record-breaking climate-fuelled floods across the country, there's never been a more important time for climate action. A Victorian Forest Alliance report found that native forest logging in Victoria emits around 3 million tonnes of carbon per year, and that's the equivalent of 700,000 cars. What's the federal government doing to ensure native forests in Victoria are protected and that native forest logging isn't worsening our climate crisis?
Thank you, Senator Rice. Minister.
Well, again, if Senator Rice may have noticed that only last week at the COP conference, Australia joined 25 other nations in signing up to the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, And again, that is another demonstration of our determination to ensure that forestry is conducted in an environmentally sustainable manner. That is the intent of the RFAs. That is the intent of the policies that we've pursued. If particular forestry operations don't do the right thing, then they will suffer the consequences of that. And that's what we've seen as a result of some of that litigation at the moment. But we are not going to stray beyond our responsibilities in the forestry space. These are joint exercises between the federal and the state government. And as I say, look at our election commitments, look at our budget, which delivered over $200 million towards forestry, in particular plantation timber, while also making sure that we're providing workers with training and increasing the efficiency of native forestry.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Senator Pratt.
My question is to the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Women, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister please inform the Senate how women will benefit from the reforms in the Secure Jobs and Better Pay Bill?
Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Pratt, and I thank you for the question and for your long-standing interest in gender equality and achieving gender equality in this country. The Secure Job Better Pay Bill will deliver on the Albanese government's commitment to a fairer workplace relations system, which provides Australians with job security, gender equality and sustainable wage growth. For nearly a decade, wages were kept low as a deliberate design feature of the previous government's management of the economy. The Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill will take long overdue steps to promote gender equality and promote pay and secure work for women. The bill puts gender equality at the heart of the Fair Work system by making gender equality and job security objects of the Fair Work Act. It will make it easier for working women in undervalued industries to win a pay equity claim before the Commission by removing the need to find a male comparator and by making clear that sex discrimination is not necessary to establish that work has been undervalued. The bill will establish a pay equity expert panel and a care and community sector expert panel in the Fair Work Commission, supported by $20 million in funding from the October budget. It will provide greater access for bargaining for lower paid and feminised sectors through the supported bargaining stream. It will increase pay transparency by prohibiting pay secrecy clauses and strengthen access to flexible working arrangements so families can better share and manage their caring responsibilities. And where the previous government refused to act, this bill will prohibit sexual harassment under the Fair Work Act, a recommendation of the Respect at Work report. President, women have waited far too long for their work to be properly valued, to get better access to flexible work and to feel safe and respected at work.
Thank you, Minister.
They should not have to wait any longer.
Senator Pratt's first supplementary.
Can the Minister outline how multi-employer bargaining will help close the gender pay gap?
Minister.
Thank you very much, President. I thank Senator Pratt for the question because the gender pay gap continues to sit at 14.1%. I think all of us on this side of the chamber agree that that is unacceptable, that women go to work, they work hard and they earn less than men in the workplace. We must address the gender pay gap if we are going to have a gender-equal Australia. The Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill will provide greater access to bargaining for low-paid, highly feminised sectors such as the community sector, cleaning and early childhood education and care. Employees on enterprise agreements earn, on average, more than employees on awards. For example, in the female-dominated healthcare and social assistance industry, employees on award are earning 19% less in average hourly earnings than employees on collective agreements. We must pass these laws so we can improve the pay rates for women in these industries.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pratt, second supplementary.
Can the Minister outline how these reforms align with the government's broader efforts to advance gender equality?
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Minister.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Senator Pratt, and yes, I can. The reforms are just one aspect of this government's ambition for Australia to be a leader on gender equality. Our budget put gender equality front and centre, investing over $7 billion in initiatives that will drive gender equality in this country. We are modernising paid parental leave and investing in cheaper childcare. We introduced paid domestic violence leave. We supported wage increases for workers on minimum wages and in aged care. We're taking action to strengthen gender pay reporting. We'll implement all recommendations of the Respect at Work report, and we'll keep the focus on gender equality through a national strategy to achieve gender equality, the work which has started now and will be finished in the first half of next year. We also have the Women's Economic Equality Task Force led by Sam Melston and 12 other amazing women who are putting their shoulder to the wheel to make sure that we can respond to the work that they do on assisting us to address economic inequality for women.
Senator Pocock. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Social Services, Minister Farrell. Australians rightly celebrate when we lead the world. We are rightly proud when we punch above our weight on the world stage in many things. But leading the world in gambling losses on a per capita basis is not something to celebrate. Australians lose some $25 billion every year gambling. Does the government agree that we need strong and decisive action to protect children and vulnerable people from the harmful effects of gambling and gambling advertising?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his question and his courtesy in giving us some advance notice of that question. Look, you rightly set out the amount that Australians lose each year through gambling, and that obviously is a very significant amount of money. The government is concerned about the impact of gambling on children, and we've done a number of things since coming to government in this respect. The government recently established a parliamentary inquiry into gambling and its impact on gambling harm. One of the key focus areas of the parliamentary inquiry is considering the effectiveness of current gambling advertising restrictions, particularly on limiting children's exposure to gambling products and services, including through social media. I am aware of gambling-like games, for instance the video games that include loot boxes and social gaming, and they're of concern to many community members, and work is being done on this issue, and obviously will be part of the focus of the parliamentary inquiry that I referred to earlier. The Office of the E-Safety Commissioner has a guide on its websites for parents about gaming, including those with gambling-like
Thank you, Minister.
elements.
Your time has expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. An ABC investigation last year revealed that the gambling industry has donated $80 million to political parties over the last 22 years. Given what we know about gambling and its effect on society, does the Minister believe it is still appropriate for any political party to accept donations from industries that make profit from gambling, given the effect on society?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and again thank the Senator Pocock for his question and the information that he has provided to the Senate. Look, the Labor Party is very seriously interested in the reform of the electoral process, and of course we've sent a number of recommendations to the parliamentary committee that looks after the issue of electoral funding, the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters. Some of the things that I have proposed as the Minister responsible in that area have been things like reducing the threshold levels for the disclosure of donations. So at the moment, the figure is
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary. Order.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. How will the government ensure that no child is subjected to gambling advertising, whether that's on social media or in the broadcasting of live sports events?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
But Walsh was gaining.
Minister.
Thank you, President. Again, thank Senator Pocock for his concern in this area. I actually didn't sort of finish my previous answer, unfortunately, and I'll just say that one of the things that we're proposing to do is in that space is real-time disclosure of donations. The issue that you raise about harm on children, we have set up an inquiry, as I mentioned in one of my earlier answers, Senator Pocock, and I would hope that yourself and other members of the Senate who have got an interest in this area will take the opportunity of that inquiry to bring the sorts of issues that you've quite rightly raised here today. Bring that to the committee so that committee can
Senator
look at
Thorpe.
these issues and
Thank you,
deal with
Minister.
it in
Your
a
time
sensible
has expired.
fashion.
Senator Thorpe, I would ask that you not continue with those interjections. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Minister, yesterday in response to a question from Senator Cash, you said, and I quote, "We are dealing with an inflation challenge at the moment, and no one is pretending that wages should be growing at the pace of inflation." End quote. Can you confirm it's the government's position that you don't expect wages to grow at the pace of inflation?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister.
Thank you. Well, the point I was making yesterday, and I thank the senator for the question, was that we don't expect wages to grow at the rate of inflation as it currently is now. You'll see from the budget papers, I think it's in the 24-25 financial year, that we are expecting wages to move ahead of inflation. But that is what the budget papers say. But I was responding to a question about wages moving. Well, what I was responding to was wages moving at the rate of inflation as inflation currently is. And I think you wouldn't find anybody, including on your side, that would be arguing for wage increases in the order of 8%. I wouldn't imagine, because that will cause other problems that we are trying to avoid. Wages at the moment are not impacting on inflation. Inflation is being largely contributed to, or the increase in inflation is down to energy costs caused by the war in Ukraine and by some of those supply chain issues, shortages that we've seen coming out of the pandemic. So we are taking a responsible position in relation to wages. We want to get wages moving. That's why we have the Industrial Relations Bill before the Parliament. We want to see an end of the wage stagnation decade that was overseen by the former government. We've made no secret that we want to deal with wage inequality in low-paid, feminised industries. And the budget papers outline clearly the wage forecasts over the forward estimates, that they will remain below inflation for the first 2 years, and then they will gradually increase to a point where they just increase above inflation in that third year.
Senator Fawcett, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. The Australian public are also dealing with the reality of the current situation, where they are seeing costs going up, and they will recall the promise made before the election this year, on the 11th of May, by the now Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, who said, and I quote, "Labor wants to make sure that wages keep pace with the cost of living," end quote. So can you confirm, Minister, that Labor has abandoned that promise to the Australian people made before the election
Senator Fawcett.
to keep pace with the cost of...
Minister.
Thank you, and I think you'll see from our budget papers we do want workers to get wage increases that help them deal with the cost of living. No, so the senator is incorrect when he asserts that. There has been no change in position from this government. We are dealing with an inflation problem in this country right now, though, in case anyone over there hadn't noticed. If you haven't noticed, right, you've noticed, have you? OK.
Order.
All right.
Order.
Well, just the reality here is that we are trying to deal with the inflation challenge, and we are, in a sensible and responsible way, dealing with the after effects of a decade of wage stagnation. You are the party of wage stagnation. So the nerve of you to stand up and challenge us on our position to get wages moving is a bit...
Senator Henderson.
Thank you, Madam President. Once and again, I would draw the minister's attention to the fact that she needs to make her comments through the chair.
I believe the minister is mostly making her comments to the chair. I would also ask those on my left to stop calling out. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. And in fact, in the last 6 months, since we came into government, we have done a number of things, and I'm sure I'll get the opportunity to continue on this, including supporting increases to the minimum wage that you never did.
Your time has expired. Senator Fawcett, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I again go to the Australian public's expectation there will be consistency before and after the election. On the 20th of May, the now Prime Minister said, and I quote, "It's not bad luck, it's bad policy that wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living." End quote. Minister, will you now also label this situation your bad policy that wages are not keeping up with inflation, rather than blaming circumstances?
Thank you, Senator Fawcett. Minister.
That's right. Don't deal with the economic reality right now. But I would say, in response to that question, vote for the Industrial Relations Bill. Vote for it. That's the single biggest thing you could do right now to help us get wages moving. That's what you should do. You've overseen a decade of wage stagnation. You're now saying you want to see wages keep up with the cost of living. Well, support with us, walk with us. Stop being the party of work choices. Stop being the party that want to keep wages down. Remember that. Stop wanting to make childcare, aged care workers, those on minimum wage, not get a decent pay rise. Stop arguing about things. When in government, you had that section about the importance of low-paid work, a whole section in your submission to the Fair Work Commission. That's your record. We're trying to get wages moving. We proudly stand next to working people to argue for that, and join with us and support the legislation.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister Watt. Minister, the government's Secure Jobs Better Pay bill abolishes the Australian Building and Construction Commission. What problems are solved by specifically abolishing the ABCC that aren't actually caused by the code it is meant to enforce, which your government has already acted on?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Lambie. Senator Lambie would be well aware that for a number of years leading into the last election, it was Labor's clear policy to abolish the ABCC, and that was because it had completely failed workers in the building industry and firms in the building industry as well. Senator Lambie, or through the President, Senator Lambie, if you haven't already seen these statistics, I'm happy to show you the figures that show that the entire time the ABCC was in existence, productivity on building sites actually fell. It went backwards. So for all the claims that were made that it was going to be the solution to productivity and drive the industry forward, the facts actually show that the industry went backwards in productivity. And that's let alone the gross waste of taxpayers' money that we saw under the ABCC, pursuing trivial matters through the courts, and we just went through it again at estimates recently. We just went through it again at estimates recently about the legal expenditure.
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Order. Order. I remind those on my left, this is Senator Lambie's question. She has the right to hear the answer in silence. As you're well aware, everyone in this chamber is aware that crossbenchers do not get the same opportunity as the major parties to ask questions, and I would ask those to be courteous and allow Senator Lambie to hear the answer in silence. Minister, please continue.
President. And Senator Lambie, I can assure you that this government does take workplace conduct, whether it be from workers, from businesses, from unions, very seriously. And that's why, under the system that we're proposing, the Fair Work Ombudsman will have a range of powers to take action where that's warranted. I guess our fundamental point is that we don't think that different workers should be treated differently. We should have one regulator of conduct on work sites, and that is the Fair Work Ombudsman. We don't need an additional body for one industry that pursues workers and pursues unions and leaves employers alone, when we all know that in the building industry there are rogue employers as well. The ABCC never did anything about that. It did very little to recover underpayments to workers, a very serious issue, and we think the Fair Work Ombudsman is the appropriate place to do that work.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. I understand that the Labor Party and the union movement doesn't like the fact that the ABCC has busied itself policing flags and stickers. I agree. Regulators shouldn't be distracted by small beer infringements like that. But you can fix that with a tighter building code. The CFMMEU has made it clear it will continue to breach laws it does not agree with. That's not restricted to stickers and flags. Does your government not believe in the need for a building code at all?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. And Minister Watt, I'll just remind you to make your remarks to the Chair.
Through the Chair.
Please.
Certainly. Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Lambie. President, the building code, again, was another example of this government having a very one-sided, the former government having a very one-sided attitude towards conduct on building sites. The building code was a part of the arsenal of the ABCC, which was used to crack down on unions and workers and do nothing about the abuse of workers and unions on construction sites. What we're in favour of is a balanced approach from a regulator that applies across all industries, so that whether you're a hospitality worker or a childcare worker or a truckie, Senator Sterle, or a construction worker, I know truckies always behave. I remember that from my days representing the TWU. But whatever industry it is, people deserve to be treated equally, and the building code was another part of that arsenal, and that's why we've repealed it.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Madam President, the Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill transfers some of the power from the ABCC to the Fair Work Ombudsman, but doesn't transfer all of its budget. It's being asked to do more without the money to do it. Something's got to give here. What safeguards will you put in place so the Fair Work Ombudsman doesn't have to choose between its core business like policing wage theft and policing the industry?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks again, Senator Lambie. Again, I remember from the estimates hearings which we recently conducted, evidence was given about a number of positions from the ABCC moving across to the Fair Work Ombudsman, so they are being given extra resources to pursue whether it be employers, unions, workers who are doing the wrong thing on work sites. So I'm very confident that the Fair Work Ombudsman does have the resources to pick up some of those roles that the ABCC previously played. What we're about is making sure that important things that are actually reasonable in a workplace setting get pursued by the Fair Work Ombudsman, and all the nonsense and politicisation that the ABCC was given taxpayers' funding for, that is what is going to end. And I think that's what people voted for. We could not have been clearer in the lead up to the election that we were going to abolish the ABCC. We feel that we've got a mandate to implement that reform now, along with all the other reforms that we're planning to implement. And I'm out of time.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Can the Minister update the Senate on developments in the human rights situation in Iran overnight and the response by Iranians themselves?
Minister.
Thank you to Senator Green. I thank her for her interest in this matter and for her solidarity with the women and men of Iran who have been standing against the repressive and violent actions of the regime, and I acknowledge that is a position shared by, I hope, all in this chamber, but certainly many across the chamber have been also raising their voices. I know that people would have been following events in Iran closely, and I think all of us would have been moved by the image overnight of the Iranian football team standing silent during the Iranian regime's anthem. And this was a courageous act. a courageous act. By refusing to sing the anthem, they're actually joining a chorus. Joining a chorus in Iran and around the world that has grown steadily louder over the last 2 months. And while the Iranian soccer team staged their protests within Iran continued, especially in majority Kurdish areas. And so did the regime's brutal response. That response included attacking protesters using machine guns mounted on vehicles and even using drones, missiles, and the death toll now runs well into the hundreds. We all know that this started on September 16th with the death of Mahsa Amini, whose Kurdish name was Jinnah. Her unexplained death in the custody of the so-called morality police was a spark that lit a flame of protest that has spread across Iran and to the streets of cities around the world, including Australia. Protest activity has taken many forms: street demonstrations, women and girls removing their hijabs with others also cutting off their hair. In solidarity with protesters, Iranian shopkeepers, factory workers and employees in the oil and petrochemical sectors have participated in strikes, and we saw Iranian archer Parmida Ghassemi remove her hijab in a sign of solidarity during an award ceremony in
Senator Green's first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, how has the government responded to these developments overnight?
Thank you, Senator Green. Minister.
Thank you. With new reports of violence and retaliation against those expressing their right to protest, this morning the Australian government again called in Iran's Chargé d'Affaires, and I welcome the opposition's meeting with the Chargé a few weeks ago. It is important that Australia speaks with one voice in conveying the abhorrence of these events. And as Iranian authorities have brutally cracked down on protesters, this country has joined in the international condemnation. We have made a number of international interventions, including supporting the convening of a special session of the Human Rights Council on the situation in Iran, which will take place this week. We provided early co-sponsorship of a resolution calling for a fact-finding mission, and we will advocate intensively to build support for it. Just as the Iranian representative was left in no doubt, the Senate should be clear of this government's resolve to continue working with others to build pressure on the regime to cease its brutal campaign against its own citizens.
Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. What can the government say to Australians who are concerned about reports of harassment and foreign interference by the Iranian regime?
Minister.
I certainly am, and I've no doubt that all senators would be deeply concerned with the reports of Australians here in Australia being harassed for their participation in protests and the reported threats made against their families in Iran. You see, of course, the right to peaceful protest is at the heart of Australia's democracy. Our concerns were relayed in no uncertain terms to the Iranian Chargé d'Affaires this morning, and the Department of Home Affairs Counter-Foreign Interference Coordination Centre is working with the community to conduct targeted engagement on foreign interference. My message to anyone involved in such activities is this: Australia's laws on foreign interference are unequivocal. Allegations of foreign interference are investigated, and we will prosecute if appropriate. We will defend our democracy and people's right to protest and express their views within Australia, just as we stand up for the rights of those to do so elsewhere.
Mr. Wong, your time is expired. Senator Duniam.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for the Environment, Senator Wong. And I refer to reports in The Australian today revealing that Ms Plibersek's decision on the 4th of November to review 18 previous ministerial approvals of coal and gas projects may cost 174,000 Australians their jobs and cause the loss of $100 billion worth of investment in our country. Has the government done any modelling on the economic and social impacts of these decisions? And if so, what does the modelling actually say?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Thank you for the question, Senator Duniam. I infer from the question, and I don't have the detailed information before me, I may have at any point in this answer, that this is a review in the context of Ms Plibersek's statutory role. As such, I wouldn't be responding to assertions by others about what might or might occur, might not occur in the context of that review, and obviously the government wouldn't be in a position of modelling hypotheticals.
Senator Duniam, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given the decision to review these projects has come about because of legal action of Environmental Justice Australia, a group set to benefit from the recent budget in a share of nearly $10 million of government funding to continue to appeal coal and gas projects, will the government review its decision to hand taxpayers' money to organisations jeopardising jobs and projects helping to supply our energy?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister Wong.
Did he actually say who they were? I'm not sure if you actually said the name of the entity, but I would make the point that we live in a country where there is the rule of law, and funding entities or people who then may use their rights under the rule of law and exercise them. That is what happens in a democracy which respects the rule of law.
Senator Duniam, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I've got no issue with the rule of law, but I do have an issue with taxpayers' money being used this way. How can the government honestly tell Australians it is for lower power prices and more Australian jobs when it is actually funding groups engaged in green lawfare, jeopardising much-needed jobs and, of course, projects that supply our energy?
Thank you, Senator Duniam. Minister.
I think, if I may say, Senator Duniam, and I understand why he's asking the question, there were a lot of non-sequiturs there. The government will apply its approach to environmental approvals under the law which exists, which is the same law as was applied under you. And I certainly wouldn't be commenting on any projects currently under assessment by the Minister now or in the future. And with that, if I may, I'd ask that further questions be placed on notice.